That concludes our public participation, and it brings us to item number 13, which is our action agenda. And our first item is 13A, selected employment items shown in Exhibit A. Do I have a motion? Mr. Haltwanger.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the selected items located in Exhibit A.
We have a second. Mr. Cates, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to item 13B. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent and staff for a presentation, and then we'll move on through the action of this.
Members of the board, at this time, I wish to share with you my recommendation with regard to the potential purchase of real estate. On September 12, 2016, as a part of Vision 2020, I proposed 5 different items for consideration. The second one on that list was to build a new elementary school, which I've called Elementary Number 13, in the Chapin geographical area. Subsequently, I recommended that the new elementary school be located on the Amix Ferry side of Chapin. We contracted with an experienced professional to locate a potential site or sites, an experienced professional who has led searches for about 100 school sites in our state. We secured option agreements to purchase 2 adjoining tracts of 2 adjoining properties on Amix Ferry Road, and we have been conducting our due diligence on those properties over the course of the past several months. During that time, we've had many questions, and I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the civic engagement that we experienced throughout this process and this evening. I would say that the questions fall into basically 6 different areas: capacity enrollment, rezoning, safety, site location, policy, and price. And I would like to respond to each of those this evening. First of all, is there a need for an additional elementary school? And my answer to that is yes. Now, the need was documented in the 2008 referendum. An additional elementary school was approved in the 2008 referendum, but has not been built. The need is even greater now in 2017 than it was then in 2008. Portables used for instruction. I would like to remind all of us that while I was not here in 2008, I believe the focus of the 2008 referendum was primarily to help the district catch up with the growth that it experienced to that period of time. When in 2009, 2010, there were 119 portable classrooms used for instructional purposes. Now, that's an important point. Tonight we heard about some portables that are used for storage. Those are not included in this count at this time. We're talking about portables that are used for instruction. So in 2009, 2010, approximately 2,300 students were in portable classrooms virtually throughout the day or for a major portion of their day. As the 2008 projects came online, you see the number of portables used for instruction continued to decrease, and we hit a low in 2015-16 when we opened the new Chapin Middle School and reconfigured, taking the 5th grade classes out of Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary. And that year we were down to only 10 portable classrooms used for instruction. That number crept back up in 16-17, and next year we will have 30 portable classrooms used for instruction. Those portables are really on 3 campuses: Lake Murray Elementary, Chapin Elementary, and Dutch Fork Middle School. Now, you're all familiar with the whole basic situation with portables, but I have a very basic belief which drives the recommendation that I'm going to make. I believe for educational and safety reasons, it's preferable to have students in brick and mortar buildings than in portable classrooms. Here are a couple of actual pictures of where we are today. These are the portable classrooms we're using at Chapin Elementary, and another picture of the portables at Lake Murray Elementary. We've seen unusual weather events in the past 2 years, including even a situation with a horrific situation with rain. And I believe that for safety reasons related to weather occurrences, as well as related to safety issues, it's better to have students in the building than outside the buildings. The next question, has our growth in enrollment peaked? Well, the projections are for continued growth. I cite a couple of articles. This is from Wednesday, April 5th in the state newspaper. The headline was 1 million in the Columbia area, expected by 2035. And this is information coming from the Central Midlands Council of Governments. And the quote from that article that strikes me is this one. The Columbia area's population is expected to hit 1 million by 2035. The Blythewood area and the town of Lexington are likely to grow mightily, along with people living in downtown Columbia and on Lake Murray. A second article, which dealt with the whole issue of the Amix Ferry Peninsula, entitled The Panelbacks Limits on Homes on Lake Murray Peninsula, which was an article that appeared, I believe, 1 month ago today. And within that article is this quote: the Amix Ferry Peninsula is home for 4,700 residents, up 400 since the 2010 census, and has 1,850 homes, up from 1,700 in 2010. That figure comes from the Central Midlands Council of Governments, and again was reported by the state a month ago. Now, here is a map of our school district. You see the outline of District 5, and you see where the housing permits have been going for the past 5 years. And you notice that they are scattered throughout our entire district, but with a heavy concentration in our Chapin geographical area. Can we address our overcrowding at Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray through rezoning? Well, my answer to that is this. Rezoning can provide some temporary relief, and it's something we will be doing within not this coming school year, but the year thereafter. But it will not offer a permanent solution. Now, here's a basic belief that guides my view about rezoning. I've been a superintendent a long time and have been through many rezonings. But my basic belief is this: schools are learning communities, not warehouses. Families get attached to schools and their living, breathing organization of the school. It isn't merely stuffing a student into an empty seat where there happens to be one in a year. Families get attached, students get attached. So here's the problem that comes with using rezoning. Again, if it solves the problem for a long time, that's great. But if it's merely a very temporary solution, it only creates other problems. Again, this is our district, and these are the 12 elementary school zones in the district. The yellow indicates the 5 elementary schools in the Irmo geographical area. The green represents the 5 schools in the Dutch Fork geographical area. And the blue represents the two schools in the Chapin geographical area. And I would point out that there are students who attend Ballantyne Elementary who are technically a part of the Chapin geographical area and proceed through Chapin Intermediate, Chapin Middle, and Chapin High. Now here is a problem that we face when we talk about doing rezoning. When I arrived here in 2011, the schools with available seats were Seven Oaks, or with the most, I should say, the most available seats would have been Seven Oaks Elementary at the extreme east and at Harbison West. So if we'd taken advantage of all those seats, we would have had a choice. We could have dominoed people all the way down, moving Chapin to Lake Murray to Ballantyne, Ballantyne to Corley, and so on to make sure that we were taking advantage of every single seat that we had. Another option would have been to have taken students from our most overcrowded schools and sending them past these other schools to where there might be some seats. Well, as of the end of last year, our largest school was Lake Murray. Our second largest by enrollment was Chapin L. And our third largest was Harbison West. And Seven Oaks was I think it was fifth. I think Ballantyne was fourth, Seven Oaks was fifth. So we'd moved all these kids and dominoed them down here. Now all of a sudden, we would have to domino them back because they have no room in those particular schools. So that's the problem with rezoning. When we rezone, we want it to be a permanent solution. Now, the next question. Is the site safe, and has a traffic study been done? Well, safety, I understand, is a huge issue and a huge concern at all of our schools. And I certainly appreciate that concern greatly. Of course, our buses travel Amex Ferry Road every day, and the students who live there are transported from their homes in that area through the town of Chapin down to Chapin Elementary and back daily. But I would tell you, a traffic study has been completed, and what it shows is that no improvements are needed beyond the highway right-of-way. Next slide, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you, please, our superintendent's making a presentation. I want to ask all of you to be respectful. We're going to respect you. We listen to you. I want you to listen to this process. I'm requesting that of you. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Why the Amex Ferry side of Chapin, and why not Mount Vernon Church Road, Derrick Pond Road? This was a question I answered at our board meeting on May 22nd in my Vision 2020 update at Nursery Road Elementary. And basically it boils down to 2 points that I made then and I'll make again now. It's important that we serve Chapin students in Chapin, and it's important to preserve the Chapin geographical grouping concept. And I reached those conclusions from the interviews that I did in the fall of 2010 with some people in this very room right now who said to me that these were the 2 areas that I really needed to pay attention to. Now, going back to the map of our district, you see again that the Chapin geographical area, which is bounded on the south by Lake Murray, bounded over here partially by the Broad River, is not quite half of our district, but far more than a third of our district, and we have only 2 elementary schools in that particular geographical area. Now, let's go to the next slide, I believe, lifts the Chapin cluster out of that particular map. And so you see this is the Chapin geographical area, again, bounded on the south by the lake, bounded by the Broad River, with the interstate cutting through the middle. And one of the things that drove my decision for us to take a look at putting a school on the west side of Chapin was this. When we add a third school in this particular geographic area, of course, it will cause zone lines to be drawn, although I'm a huge advocate of choice, letting people go where they can provide their own transportation when there are seats available. But certainly bus routes would be drawn, and where the buses go would be redone. So in my thinking, here's where I was coming from. People had told me it's important to keep the Chapin kids in Chapin. We didn't want the Chapin kids to be the ones that get moved from Chapin down through to the eastern part of the district. And secondly, people didn't want us to mess up the concept where kids who started in an elementary school together would go through the whole progression of being in the whole series of schools with the same students. So what drove my recommendation to look for a school on this side is that a third school, when you drop it in, changes the whole attendance pattern. When you look at the density of our population, it's heavily located right now around Lake Murray Elementary. So were we to build the next school here, right here, which is where our property is on Derrick Pond Road, the kids would either have to come from here over here, or they would have to be taken from an area where they're very close to Lake Murray to go there, and pulling more kids from Chapin to Lake Murray, which is my understanding what caused a lot of heartburn 20 years ago. So my thought, what drove this decision on the third, and I have said before, I do believe that despite what others may think, my own personal belief is that our growth will continue because of the popularity of the lake and the popularity of our Chapin schools. And I believe that, again, I believe that in order to keep as many kids as possible from being moved more than one time, or families being relocated more than one time, that it makes better sense to leave those kids in close proximity to Lake Murray, which there are many of them at Lake Murray, take the kids who live in Chapin and place them on the east side of Chapin, put them in Chapin, and create the new school on the west side of Chapin. Again, today, these students are being transported through up to the town of Chapin and coming down Old Lexington Road to Chapin Elementary every day. And with a school over here, it would save them that particular movement of traffic every day. Next slide, please. Question: have the requirements of the district's policy on site acquisition, policy FFE, been met? I'll walk through the attached checklist with you. The purpose of FEE, which is a board policy, is to establish the basic structure for the acquisition of sites for school construction, and states that the board believes it's appropriate and necessary to identify and acquire land in a formalized manner to assure the most advantageous pieces of real estate are obtained for School District 5 of Lexington and Richland counties. There are several headings underneath that policy. One section deals with establishing the parameters for selection, and I submit that that has been done. A second section is to identify and evaluate potential sites, which that's been done. And a third area is to perform final site selection, and that we do the things listed here, including as part of the contingent technical evaluation, the district will hire an MAI certified appraiser. That's been done. Next. The policy ends by stating, whenever possible, the board will acquire school sites long before they're needed. Such a policy will permit a better choice of site at acreage rather than lot prices and will reduce the need for costly demolition of residential or other structures. We also looked at the requirements of state law, and that includes each of these, current zoning status, utility information, would point out that we have water and sewer at this site, which is a huge cost savings to the district, a certified plat, phase 1 environmental report, a topographical map, and a geotechnical report. All have been done and all are most favorable for this particular site. One of the other questions is the price we're paying a fair price. Here's my answer to that. The value of the land is priced fairly for its intended purpose, and the purchase price is supported by the appraisal. And again, it's an MAI appraisal. Just last week, this report appeared in the state paper. Public supermarkets recently purchased 9 acres of land near White Knoll High School. The grocer paid $4.5 million to acquire 9 acres. Now, if the grocer had been buying it to be a hayfield, it would have been too much money. And if we were buying this for it to be a hayfield or for it to be a housing development, we would be paying too much money. But when we look at the intended purpose of a site, it is an appropriate price. Now, what are the results of the due diligence assessment? Again, by state law, our individual due diligence reports do not become available until such time or if the district agrees to votes to purchase this property and executes the contract. But many of the considerations will be discussed in this very brief video in an interview with the person who helped us locate this particular site.
Look across the scope of the site, it's just a wonderful lane, and I can see the main facility being constructed here. Buses would be on this end, parent loops would be on the far end, and it just has a lot to offer. When looking for a school site, the state has certain criteria that must be met. After we've met the basic criteria, the required criteria of the state, then I try to scan all the properties of that area to see how many properties have 1,300 feet of clear road frontage. Very, very few. So in essence, we have to buy multiple sites from multiple property owners that join in order to do this. And we did that with this one here. It's not about just this school site, but where will the next one be and the next one be? Because there needs to be some type of spatial relationship between schools so that in the end we don't put schools too close to one another. And in doing so, that creates a lot more traffic and busing all to one area. I write proposals for boundary surveys, for topographical surveys. Then I write proposals for geotechnical, the soil borings of the property, as well as environmental. And we conduct all those types of exploratory type of engineering tasks. Obviously, if a site is cleared and is in cultivation, that's a tremendous saving to the school system, because that's $4,000 or $5,000 an acre that you would spend per acre just clearing and growing a school site. I like to look at topo. What's the property? How does it look? This site, wow, it is probably as level as I've ever purchased from the Columbia area to the northern part of our state. So it has a great topo to it. That was so attractive, and then of course the sight lines were all straight in one direction to another, and I had over 1,400 feet of road frontage. So those were big pluses. Part of the due diligence too, I look for infrastructure, water, sewer, You know, is it available? If not, where do we have to go? And many times we have to extend these services to connect some distant place away. But here it's right on the road. And so those are already available. Well, in terms of the traffic study, I would say, first of all, I've never been asked for a traffic study in my years. It's not in the state requirements. But nevertheless, we want to cooperate. We want to make certain the school is safe, that it does provide for safe ingress, egress for parents who are bringing their children, for those who come to teach there and to serve in that school district. So this traffic study is complete. It clearly states that all the improvements can be done within the confines of the property we're buying. So there's no improvements required away from the school site. And that's what we had anticipated. And I would say that probably a majority, and I can assure you, over a majority of the school sites that I have purchased have been properties that were not offered for sale at that moment. Again, we're trying to see what is the best available out there with all the geographical characteristics as well as the central location where students would be. And so as we look at all of those kind of things, this site was ideal. So after I do the work on the computer, looking at all the GIS available properties, I try to narrow the list to 2 or 3. In this case, I wrote the property owner a letter and said who I am. I had never talked to this person before. I didn't know this person before. I came to find out he actually was reared on this property. He's my age, and but has just a wonderful feeling about service. And so I wrote him a letter. And typically my letter will say, I'll give you a couple of weeks, I'll call you, or you can call me on my number. So after that period of time, we connected, and he said, well, yeah, I would be happy to talk about that, because education is so important to our school system and to our children. And so these things we reach out to, most of them, again, are not properties for sale, but we're looking not for the average property. We're looking for the property that will best suit the needs of our school system. The school will develop a legacy itself in the years to follow. A typical school is going to last 50 to 75 years. So there will be a lot of children who will enter those doors, and then they can reflect back over their years. This is where I went to school, and it was in my community. It was not somewhere away, 15 miles away. And I think also the school develops an identity for the community. People relate there, and they'll start coming there, and they'll have different types of gatherings there. Their playground activities outside, and there'll be most likely some type of walking places there. So it's an outlet place for the community, that the community can draw ties to the school, not only what can you give to me, but what can I give to my school. And that's what's so important about life. Life is not about me. What can I do to enhance the educational opportunities of our children?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the elementary school site on Amix Ferry Road appears to be an outstanding site for an additional school in the Chapin geographical area. It is in a location which will provide a school that is a much needed place to serve our youngest students in a quality environment for years to come. All of our due diligence reports are excellent. Thus, I recommend that the district proceed with purchasing this property.
Thank you, Dr. Hefner. Members of the board, it's been requested by several board members that prior to having any motions and further debate, that we have a time for anyone that would desire to weigh in regarding this property, talk about the process as they see it, or their concerns, or their likes or dislikes, that we would allow that. So at this time, for a few moments, up to about 3 minutes, I would be glad for anybody to express those feelings or concerns, and then after that, we will have, I'll entertain any motions. So is there anyone that would like to do that? Ms. Hammond, you would like to go first? Thank you, Ms. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Just for clarification, in just an opinion, may I also propose any questions from what we saw? Is that fine? Is that what you said? Wait,
what we're going to do is just have an expression of your thoughts about it.
Okay.
We're going to have a motion in a few minutes, and I think that'd be the proper time for debate and questions.
Okay.
So this is not the time for questions.
For one thing, from the beginning of this, I don't think any of us, even the community as well as this board, it's a proven fact that we do need a school in the Chapin area. I think that my concerns has been public buy-in in our process of going about showing not just the due diligence. You know, we had things we had to do like the traffic report, but also we have to give that and get a DOT report. We also had to get our appraisal. We've got all of that. But from the beginning, I have always been very concerned about the safety of the road. Not that we would not do safety sites improvements that we are, you know, told to do, but the road and the idea of one way in and one way out. I was always concerned about the cost. And I did a little research. I know there are 3 ways you can do an appraisal. We did the one that's called, let's see, I wrote it down. It's like best, the intent to use, best, highest and best use, excuse me. And I get it that we looked at other sites of schools in other areas because, of course, there's no other school out there. But for the taxpayers' benefit, I felt we should at least look at cost comparisons of even land in that area. So that concerned me. So it was cost and it was safety. And then I've been asking for this, and I felt like I've been the Lone Ranger for a while on this. I want to see the demographics and numbers of the children that would feed that school and where you would get those children. Because as a parent of 3 children that have been raised here, you do want to know before we make a vote what kids will be impacted. And you will have to move people from the Lake Murray School, and Dr. Hefter mentioned that, but you will have to move them or rezone them from that area, or, you know, are you looking at trying to make it a choice school? And all of those things we should know before we vote on it. So my opinion is still, I want to feel safety is really my gut that's the most important to me. And it is the road, and you need to hear me, not the site. It's a beautiful site. The topography's great. Have no problems with Al Berry is a class act. And I believe what he's brought to us, he believes. But I also think it's our decision to take input from the community and that we put this school in a safe place and we prove the need and where the kids are going to come from that are going to feed this school.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know that you have buy-in to certain statements, and I'm going to ask you once again, please, we're just going to make statements. We're going to be debating this issue. We had public participation earlier. At this point, we're not going to have these outbursts. Now, you can either comply with that, or we'll have to clear the room if you just can't do that. Is anyone else that would like to input? Ms. Hutchison. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd please ask you to refrain from, Ms. Hutchison, just wait just a minute. Ms. Hutchison.
Thank you. We just have to remember that I think it's only 3 of these can stay on at one time. I just want to say that I do appreciate the passion that this community has shown for the past several months. I do know that you love your community and you have been outspoken and you have spent a lot of time in emails and conversations about the love you have for this community. I do understand that. But I also understand that the responsibility of the school district and of the school board members is to provide for our current and future students. We have an obligation to make sure that we provide adequate space, uncrowded space, and space in areas of the district where we have growth and where we anticipate growth. 2, I have heard from supporters of this school site. We've had a few who have spoken tonight. I've had others who have called me or emailed me to say that they support the site. They believe in the benefit of having a neighborhood school. They know that growth has come. They've seen growth. So we do have supporters. Next, I'm very pleased with the outcome of the due diligence reports. I had a chance to review the executive summaries, and they are quite good. I appreciate the video that Mr. Berry was featured in, because he did speak very eloquently about the site. It really is an incredible site, and I have worked on the school board for quite some time, seen a lot of school sites, and this is an incredible site with all the advantages that he mentioned. Next, growth is certain, and just as the community loves this area of Amex Ferry and St. Peter's Church Road, etc., other people do want to live up there. I believe, I don't have the number right in front of me, but I believe in 2016 there were maybe 136 home sites that had permits. So there will be growth up there. And we do have to be prepared for the growth. I can just imagine a board 10 years from now, not us, who will, if we don't start purchasing property and putting schools where the need is and where the future need is expected, that they will say, what in the world were those people thinking? They were so short-sighted, and we can't operate like this. We are planning schools to last for 50 to 75 years. I do have to say that it does sadden me to hear the false accusations that have been made about members of the board or administration, accusing them of collusion with realtors or developers. None of that is going on to the best of my knowledge, and I know all of these folks, and I think that's some really hurtful accusations, and it is just not true. And last, we have heard for months about the safety concerns of Amex Ferry. This is not a new situation at all. I have been down Amex Ferry Road for the past 20 years, having friends and relatives down there in the past. I hope the positive thing that will come from this is that this community, and if the school district, the school board does approve the site, that the school district too, will work on the speeding problem. When Mr. White and I were up there with Mr. Berry about a month ago, we had to pull over on the side of the road twice so speeding vehicles that were right behind us could zoom past us. And then another time, a sports car on a pretty dangerous stretch went speeding past us. Speed is the problem. It's not the road. If you go the appropriate speed. But if this is a problem for this community, then I think that the appropriate public safety divisions, or whoever it is, Chapin Police, Lexington County, we need to contact them. The community needs to contact them and ask them to crack down on speeders, to put some signage in place, to do something, because speeding should not be allowed. It is a fine road. I've ridden on a lot worse, and there are a lot worse around the community. But speeding just should not be allowed. It should not have been allowed for years. So I do hope the outcome of this that will change. I want to thank the administration for being so thorough in your review of this site. I know that we have been looking for sites for some time, and as was mentioned by the superintendent and also Mr. Berry, it is difficult to find a school site that is appropriate, that meets all the criteria. And I think this one does. I do believe, as someone mentioned, that the school does become the center of the community. If the board approves the purchase, I envision that it would replace the fire station as the most appropriate place for a voting area. I have seen the parked cars on the side of the road and how dangerous it is to park around the fire station, so I could envision that would be another benefit. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchison. Let's just pause a minute. We have some people leaving the room. We'll let that occur. Ms. Hutchison, thank you again. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Ms. Bumgardner.
I've gotten a lot of emails and listened to everybody as they've come up to speak at this public participation and at others, and I've been very respectful. I haven't made any comments. I do answer some of the emails. I haven't answered all of them, and some of them have been very respectful, and some of them have been hostile or aggressive. I've had people make, I respond to one, and then they keep sending more emails and wanting more the same answer. I keep giving the same answer, and they don't like it. So I get accused of not listening. But listening is not agreeing, and insulting is not a way to subjugate somebody to your will. I listen, and sometimes there's varying. If you listen tonight carefully, there were some people who said that we need to move the excess kids at Lake Murray to Irmo. And, I would wonder if they would come and talk to the parents at Lake Murray and say, we don't want your children. I don't think that we're not hearing from those silent people who have school-age kids. But you sit there and say, we don't want you, we want you in Irmo, then I think you would hear from them, and it would even be but the problem is yes, there's differencing of opinion. When Dr. Hefner spoke, he spoke using facts. And whether you agree with them or not, he deserved to be listened to. The same way that each one of us. At this point, we have had public participation, and everybody has had an opportunity to speak and to have their chance to come and speak. And it should be afforded to each one of us. We are charged with what is best for the school district. People move to our school district. Only a small portion move to the lake. The majority of people that live in District 5 move there for our schools. We need to make our schools the best, and they are. When you start comparing our schools to any schools in the state of South Carolina or even nationally, we can compete with anybody, and that's where we want to stay. Like right now, Lake Murray has one less grade level than it did 2 years ago. That is an entire grade, and it's still got over 1,100 kids. And at that point, you need to do something. You could talk to some people who've been through overcrowding, and at some point you're going to start suffer. The education's going to suffer. And so we need to make a plan of what to do with the overcrowding at Lake Murray. And right now, with one grade less, Chapin has little capacity, but not a whole lot of room to move 400 or 500 kids. So, and again, Irmo is not a good solution. So we need to look at options. And one of the things that I want to mention is sometimes we're up here charged, we've got to not only look at what is best for a person who lives in Amex Ferry Road, but we have to look at what is best for the majority. Mr. Spock said in one of the movies, you know, the good of the many outweighs the good of one. So, you know, that's what we're charged with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baumgardner. Is anyone else that would like to address the issues going on? Mr. Cates?
As the newest board member, I must say it was much easier on the other side of the table. You've asked to be heard, you've asked to be respected. I've taken numerous calls, answered untold emails, met with many of you one-on-one, and have gladly done so. When I left the house this afternoon, my wife asked me, what was I going to do? And my response to her was that I was going to do what I have pledged to do all along, which was to be open-minded, deliberate in my decision, and rely on the facts that were given to me, to appreciate folks' passion, but not to just respond to comments as though they were fact. So it's been difficult to come to a decision. It's been a long process. I must say I respect Dr. Hefner, his staff that are here tonight, those folks that work long and tireless hours that we never see, you never see, but we get to interact with them. I appreciate the hard work and the commitment they have to our students and to this board. I'm in a unique position in that I am a real estate professional and I am a certified real estate educator. Early in this process, I actually sought legal advice because many of you who trusted me enough to elect me didn't trust me enough not to question my motives and my integrity. So I sought legal advice, and it's easy for me to say that I've had no interest in this site. I have no potential gain from the purchase of this site and can meet every letter of the law as stipulated in the South Carolina Ethics Act. And more importantly, I can pass the man in the mirror test and know that I've approached this decision open-mindedly, without influence and without gain. Again, thank you. It is a difficult decision. We look forward to hoping that no matter what happens tonight, that the same energy and passion will be directed towards making all of our schools places where our students excel, where they continue to thrive, and where they set the standard for the rest of the nation and for most of the country.
Thank you, Mr. Cates. Anyone else? Mr. Halterwanger.
Not to repeat some of the things that have already been said, and I'm in agreement with a lot of other things that have been said. I only have going to give you a minute, okay? First of all, one of the gentlemen that spoke I think the last gentleman said that decisions are tough in particular situations, and we don't dare say that this is not a tough situation. And then let me thank all of you for your passion. And I think that everybody in here wants to do what's right by our young people. However, there's always a decision to be made, and that decision does not always please everybody. With that being said, we also thank as Mr. Cates said, Dr. Hefner and his staff for putting the presentation together tonight, because I think that hopefully answered a lot of questions and concerns. It did for me, because honestly, that needs to be done always. You need to give out as much information on something as possible. I agree 100% with that. And I think that has been done. Let me also say that from a personal standpoint, if I were not concerned about young people, my children were graduated in the mid-90s, I would not be sitting here, okay? I have no bone to pick, no axe to grind. I would not be here if I were not concerned about children, students in general. So let's get that out of the way. The next thing is that, and also we would not sit here and do this thankless job and not be concerned about the safety of young people. So there are a couple things you can do. We're fortunate enough to live in a society where we operate on a government, democratic society, in which the supreme power is vested in people and can be exercised directly by them. That's one of the ways you exercise a democracy, or by their elected agents under a free electoral system, which are the people that's sitting behind this desk. Now, there's something you can do about it, and it's something you do about people that you disagree with that are elected. When time comes to be reelected, maybe you may want to run and sit behind the desk and make the decision. So there's something you can do in this society that we live in. You have that choice. So again, I thank you for your concern, and again, thank Dr. Hefner and his staff for all the work that they've done, and then all the hours that we have done in listening and thinking about this and trying to do what's best for this community. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Haltwanger. Mr. White.
I don't know about y'all, but I got a headache. But what I want to convey a couple of points, and I'm in my 15th year serving on this board, and I can tell you there's nothing unique about tonight. I mean, every step of the way in our referendum and building plan, we've been sitting in rooms like this full of people who oppose what we're doing. And in spite of that, the public still approved a referendum and still got behind a lot of the people that sit at this table as we took a certain stand for what we're doing. I rode with Al Berry, and I was impressed with two things on the Amex Ferry Road. And I don't often go out and actually spend a lot of time looking at the site. One is, it is an ideal site from listening to him and talking to him. Number two, that is a beautiful peninsula. I had him drive me all the way to the end, and I can tell you it's going to get developed. I mean, whether you believe me or you want to not, people are going to want to move there, and people are going to buy property, and people are going to live there. In terms of, we hear, I think the opinions are very strong that you don't want a school on your peninsula. I understand that, but here's a simple fact, a simple reality. Every single school site we've ever placed, the local community had some people that came out and didn't want the school there. There's nothing unique about that. That happens everywhere we go. In fact, if we were to wait and find a site where everybody in that locale said, yes, you can build a site here, we would never build a school. I've experienced that with every site that we've built since I've been on this board. The cost of not doing anything can be very expensive, and people come in here and say, and you're entitled to say that, you know, that we're not thinking through this, the economics. Well, we have people full-time that do and think about these issues for us, and we hire external experts. And one thing, this site we're on today is a perfect example. In 2004, we had a superintendent that had a contract across the street for $8,600 an acre. And for this envisioned site of this high school and this Cates Center, and at that time, the majority of the board did not think the need for the referendum was there. And we didn't close on that site, and part of the reason was concerns about the rock formation in the land and whether or not it would be cost effective to build. And you fast forward through 3 superintendents and a different composition of board and different staff members who went out and purchased the land and brought to us purchase. We paid $30,000 an acre for the land right across the street because we delayed and we waited, and we had board members that wanted everything to be perfect and fit in place. And the developer ended up buying the land that supposedly had problems with rock and has put a subdivision over there. So there's a real cost in waiting. And when y'all go out and do your diligence, and Al Berry, you know, you identified over 100 sites for school districts throughout the state, you know, and we've got a site that looks very effective to build on, and it's in a very strategic location. I mean, these are things that if we defer and wait, I think one of the things Mr. Berry told me that was most enlightening, in District 2, where there's no available land, they literally have to buy properties and tear them down. They pay for buildings they tear down to build schools. You know, that may be a way in the future, but when we pick a site, and we heard it's 50, 75 years, it's actually longer than that. It's forever. We can rebuild a school on a site we own forever. We don't have to go find sites. We don't have to tear down construction. We don't have to buy homes and raise them to put in schools. And the reason I'm saying that is the decision we're making tonight is going to outlive everybody in this room. I mean, it's literally going to impact this community forever. And the final couple of points is, you know, Dr. Hefner and your staff, I think you've done an excellent job. I think Al Berry's done an excellent job. And while people, I understand you're passionate, and I know there are some faces that have been on the other side of us the entire way for 15 years, and I can see some of them in this audience, and I see there's some that are new, but there's almost 70,000 people in our district, and we represent them all. We don't represent just a few, and when we make decisions, we're making decisions for the whole and how everything fits together.
Mr. White, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for responding. I'm going to just very briefly touch on a couple of items, but I think everything's been touched. I'll give these folks a chance to get out of the room. Maybe I shouldn't have said I was going to speak. I've about cleared the room. Now, I just want to say this process that we're all involved in has been a long, arduous process. You heard our superintendent a little while ago when he gave his vision. When he gave us his vision 2020 back in September, this was a key element of that vision 2020. And as you have seen, and many of you have been involved in the process of emailing, speaking, you've given us good ideas. You've given us ideas that have called, you probably saw some of these reports tonight, that you had an impact on helping that to happen. And all those reports have helped play into our ultimate decision that we'll make tonight. But I wanted to, you realize it as I realize it, it's a very multifaceted process. It's a slow process. Sometimes the wheels of it turn very slow. One of the requirements is that any board in this state works with government agencies like the State Department of Transportation, who has approving authority, and just like with this site, when you leave tonight, look at all the road improvements that are around this site. They were required before this site was opened, and it wasn't a choice, it wasn't a negotiation, it was a requirement that that happen, and we understand that. All that's done in the interest of safety. The Department of Education, as you know, because many of you are involved in lots of processes, but they have an Office of School Facilities that is the approving authority for a site. They're recognized as the authority in the state, and if a site is presented to them that doesn't meet their criteria, then it doesn't get approved. This site has received an approval from the State Department of Education with no stipulations, no extras. They're recognizing it as an excellent site. But I wanted to say to you, you all have been patient. You have come to the microphone. You're passionate, and that's a good thing. We don't have to always agree, but we have listened to you, and that's input what we've done. And it honestly has directed the process to some degree. I want to say to this board that I serve with that I appreciate your attentiveness to seek out answers, answer emails, work with the public, visit with the public, go to the site. Many of you have been to the site on numerous occasions, and it gave you thoughts and questions that you had that you followed up with. But I'm thankful to work with a seasoned veteran board that has gone through a very detailed process in a very methodical way, and I do appreciate that. There hadn't been any quick rush to get to a certain point. From the boards, when we finish this tonight, we'll have some motions, we'll debate this further, but we may have different opinions on this board. That doesn't mean that one of us is wrong and one is right, but we have the ultimate responsibility as elected school board members to make this decision. We all respect each other. We have different opinions. That's generally the case, and that's okay. Everybody in this room is a little different. I want to say this to the staff that works for this school district. I really appreciate your diligence in helping us gather the information, help us get information for FOIA requests and questions that were posed in emails and letters. It's been very important, and I appreciate you doing that. You have very important jobs to do, and these are extra things that I know that have piled onto your jobs. And just like I mentioned at the start of the meeting tonight, we've got about 17,000 plus students in about a month that are going to come with the biggest smiling faces ready to come back to school. And I know that's our primary concern and our primary mission. But I want to thank our staff for that. I also want to thank publicly Dr. Hefner for being bold enough to share his vision and prove his vision and show us why he recommends a property on Amy's Ferry Road. There are easier ways that he could have approached this, but it's the right thing. And it was well thought out, it was well studied, and he makes his recommendation after doing all that, and I thoroughly appreciate that. I will tell you that I don't know a more consummate professional educator or man of integrity that I've ever met than Dr. Hefner, and I appreciate what he brings to this district every day. So I thank you for all that. I thank you in the community. And I know one thing that we all have in common, and that is the common denominator of the students and children in this school district. And I agree with Mr. White. The decision we make, whatever that decision is, will affect this community and these children. My estimate from my notes was 50 to 100 years, but he's right. It can be a forever thing. There are many school sites around the country that have been built and rebuilt, and they're serving kids today. And I don't know of personally a finer use of a piece of property in a community than a school. And that's just my feeling about it. But that's my feelings. I'd like to thank each one of you for weighing in tonight. And at this time, we've only had our presentation, and I would entertain a motion regarding the matter before us. And Mr. White, I think you had your hand up for a motion. Would you make that motion, please?
Yes, I'd like to move that the Board of Trustees authorize the administration to purchase adjoining properties consisting of 23.79 total acres being shown as Lexington County TMS number 001000-02-008 and TMS number 001000-02-010, according to the terms of the option agreements with the sellers. These properties are located near the intersections of Amex Ferry Road and Lake Tide Drive. The total consideration is $932,950.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Hutchison seconds. And we'll now have discussion on the motion. Mr. White, is there anything you'd like to add at this point, or we'll just open it to the floor? All right, anyone would like to discuss the motion or have a question? Ms. Hammond.
I would like to ask Dr. Hefner, is there any way, can we look in our Power School, or do we have any way to know the number, the demographics of the elementary age students that are out in that area that we know would be?
One of the things we are working on is making sure we have that capacity. We have not had a planning office for a number of years, and so that's one of the things that we are working to make sure that we will have in place, where that information could be reliable and readily available. As of today, I'm not confident that we are there at this point in time.
But would we not just today in our schools know how many kids live out there and are going to our schools in the elementary? You know,
we know school by school how many students are there.
But you don't know, like, you couldn't identify.
It's very difficult to drill it. It's very difficult to drill it down with reliability in terms of exactly where everyone lives.
And on the back, this is sort of on the same thing. One of my real problems is, you know, everything you guys have said. I agree that the most important thing we do is educating the kids, and we need schools. But I think for me, I need to know or have an answer, and I know it. But I'm going to ask some questions that you have been given by the public for the last several meetings, and you have answered them, Dr. Hefner, I know by letter, because you gave us a copy of, I think 5 in our packet. But I think it's a legitimate question as far as, again, did you say in this presentation that you would have to entertain rezoning certain kids that are at Lake Murray that would go to this school, correct? Did you say that?
I said whenever we open a third school, it will obviously involve drawing new zone lines.
And that won't be done until we've done
I think it would be premature to do it 3-5 years out until we see what, you know, where the students are, where the growth takes us, or where you know, population shift. But that's something that would occur closer to the time the school opens.
Okay, I'll follow up to that. This really concerns me, because I feel responsible. I was on the board when we knew 7 years ago that we had this overcrowded conditions at Lake Murray. And so the very idea to purchase this property and we might not build a school for 5 years would concern me. I would think we need a school as quickly as we can. And I think that goes to my other question that, and again, I'm doing this for the public. I've been given answers. But, you know, I keep chasing the transparency so that I don't see the anger that I see with some people, simply because you feel like it is your tax dollar, whether we've got it in a fund balance to purchase land or whether we are going out for a bond. We need public to be very informed as to how we reach that this is the best site. We need a school. You know, a lot of you have talked to that. I don't think anybody can, I certainly can't argue that. And I'm sorry we don't already have one. And I know several of us on this board voted for a site. And I know, Dr. Hefner, you don't think that's the right site right now. I get it. But is there any chance that the board would entertain the idea of a demographic study so that we can tell these people this is where it needs to be? And then have we looked at other sites? I think we need to tell them how many sites Mr. Berry was able to find and how we came to this one great site.
You've asked several questions there. With regard to how long it takes for a school to come into being, I think the first step is certainly to have a location, and from the time a source is identified for building a school, I think you're looking at a minimum of 2 years from that point in time to bring the school into reality, because it has to be designed and all the work has to be done. And so I think about the quickest that turnaround time can occur is 2 years. In terms of the location of the particular school, I've given you my thinking about that, and I assure you, as I have stated previously, that we at this point only own only one other potential school site, which is the site on Derrick Pond, and working very hard to make sure that it will be a site that will be appropriate for a school. With regard to the issue about an elementary school having been approved in the 2008 referendum, it was, and the reality there was from the get-go, it was a $243 million bond referendum, and it was known, as I understand it, again, I was not here, that there were not enough funds to do all 10 of the projects that were in there, that it would have to be supplemented by money from either 8% funds or from some other source, and there were some funds set aside to help with that. I think as those projects progressed, I think there were 3 factors that left the elementary school at the bottom of that list of 10 projects. One was that the district lost a documented $12 million in its inability to take advantage of interest-free bonds within the time frames that those bonds were available, which cut down on the district's buying power. Secondly, the cost of Chapin High School was far more than had been projected, given the number of improvements needed to be made there. And thirdly, and I accept responsibility for this, as we looked at the bond referendum projects, I made a recommendation in Vision 2015 that as we upgraded Chapin High and built Spring Hill High, that we needed to devote additional funds to make sure that Irmo High School and Dutch Fork High School were equitable, that they had been treated equitably in terms of the quality of facilities that we had across our 4 high schools in the state. So we redirected some funds for that. So that left us with the situation we're in, where the additional funds for the 10th project, which is the elementary school, will come from funds beyond the bond referendum.
And Dr. Hefner, I appreciate that answer, and I voted for those changes, so I can stand beside that. But I keep being frustrated that we haven't looked at other alternatives, like of a school like you've already mentioned. Valentine's pretty close if you look at the map. When we put that money, and I agreed with it, and the board did too, but I still think, how are we, I've got to justify even now, not waiting, why have we not looked at a way to eliminate the overcrowdedness there, even if we had to add on even to Lake Murray?
I assure you, as an administration, we have looked and are always looking at those particular opportunities. That's a topic that is certainly multidimensional, but we're constantly looking at those particular issues, including this year we have offered, we've opened up choice to students at Lake Murray to go to other schools where they have priority to go, and we do have people who are taking advantage of that. So we are constantly looking for ways to address our issue with making sure our students have appropriate environments for teaching and learning.
And I'll finish up with, I ask these questions. I know that you have talked with us and you've answered questions to us, but I think before this vote, these are certain questions that I feel people that have taken their time to come to the meeting and maybe weren't the ones that got a letter answering the questions, that to hear you answer those questions. Because I do think that the funds, whether they're fund balance or not, is that how we're going to fund this property? Is it fund balance?
We don't know at this particular point in time.
I think.
Well, we will put together a proposal which will come to you, but that would be a decision of the board to decide how this would be paid for.
Well, my last statement is to you board members. I think I know how you guys feel, but I think too, it's this decision is not something wrong. That it's not good to put a school, and that this land itself is great. I still consider the process, community involvement, answering all these questions, because ultimately it is the public. It's even in our policy that we get public buy-in, or we survey the public. Now, should we? Mr. White's right. We have had somebody that lives near a school never want the school there. I get that, but I think when you've advertised it, you've explained how we're using the taxpayer wisely, why we need the school, and then we prove there's no other school site in the Amesbury area. If we've proved all that, I believe people would have to not be up in arms and upset about it, and their passion would be toward a good school district that they support. And I think we need to be working toward, I don't want to go back to the days when we had such a divide of people. I think this board has worked well together over the last few years. And I think that's my concern. But anyway, thank you for letting me ask those questions. Dr. Hefner, I told you I was going to ask them, and I appreciate the work you have done. And I would like to say to this staff, I know that you have been bombarded with much stuff and answers. And so I thank you too. And thank goodness I live in a democratic society where we can voice our opinions, and we should respect each other's opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Ms. Bumgardner, you've been very patient, and then we're going to call from Ms. Bumgardner, Mr. White, and
Mr. Richardson, I think in some time we were just talking, or maybe in officers' meeting, when we were talking in the future about maybe purchasing land for a new elementary school. I think at that time you said, yes, I've put aside $1 million because I think that's about what it's going to cost for, and this was before we even had this site. Do you remember that conversation?
I do, and you're correct.
And the reason why I want to bring that up is because that's kind of what we were thinking we were going to have to pay. When I looked at land, I know it can range. And of course, again, I was very excited that this has access to water and sewer. That makes such a difference as far as being able. But so that was not unreasonable. And I know how tight you are.
No, I do not think it was unreasonable.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to mention one point that Ms. Hammond and Dr. Hefner's conversation reminded me of that nobody has mentioned, I think, through this entire process, the 3 months we've been at this. But one of the reasons we don't build on add-on schools, is we have a school size policy. And once you have a school size policy, it defines when you go to the next school. The same thing with our class size policy. But we voted on that in 2004, and you supported that. That was a unanimous vote. And each one of these schools have a range of sizes. So we don't have 1,000 kids in elementary school. We don't add, ideally we want to keep it around 650, somewhere around that. And we're only in the midpoint of the recommended ranges. There's a lot of reasons. I don't necessarily want to have to restate all those, but for Michael Cates and Larry that maybe weren't here for that whole ride, there are very fundamental, important reasons that that have been studied as to why, and the state of Florida even has limits on sizes of schools. The other thing, I think Al Berry only, when I rode with him, he only found 2 sites in the geographic area for all the reasons that Dr. Hefner described. The geographic area that Dr. Hefner had targeted is where we needed to move the next school. And it was this site. It was actually 3 sites. There was this site. He showed us the other site. Of course, these aren't listed for sale. He goes and looks at property. The second site, he showed us the different roadways we would have to improve, but the owner never would return. The owner never returned his message. So you can't negotiate with somebody that's not going to talk to you. And then the third site, I think you said you found, somebody had just paid $1 million for it, and it had lake access. And so it all stands to reason somebody's going to develop that someday. That was an investment piece of property, and they're going to put a subdivision. So the message I got from Al, my ride with Al, was this literally was the only available site that fit the specifications needed for an elementary school that the Department of Education would approve. And that in this geographic locale. And if he went somewhere else, but that Dr. Hefner targeted the reasons why he targeted that locale.
Ms. Baumgartner.
Right when we were building Lake Murray Elementary, I was not on the board then, but I remember reading the paper, and one of the big arguments, and a lot of people were very against Lake Murray Elementary. It was going to divide the Irmo community, the Chapin community, and it was going to make it no longer be it would be a more divisive community, having 2 elementary schools. So one of the things that we looked at was the fact that bringing an elementary school into Irmo. All of a sudden, the one thing that's not being argued is that it's going to divide the community, because it's actually more in Irmo proper than, Chapin proper than anything else.
Let these folks leave, and then we'll call on Ms. Hutchison. Everybody that's moving, be real careful on these risers on the steps. They're tricky. Hutchison speaks, or I speak this way. Ms. Hutchison, good job. You're clearing the room.
What?
On that, Freddie. Ms. Hutchison, thank you very much, and you have the floor.
Well, Mr. Gann, I think that I had the same result that you did when it was announced that I was going to speak, so I'll try not to take it personally. I just want to say that I think everyone has had a great opportunity to speak at this table, and it is getting late, so I suggest that we go ahead and make a vote.
I'd like to answer Mr. White from something he said.
All right, but it'd be the pleasure of the board. Let's let Ms. Hammond answer Mr. White, and then let's take a vote. Everybody's said what they want to say.
It's a little frustrating. I've never been told we had 3 sites. So how do you have information that I wouldn't have said that? I did know about the one that he tried to go to the house and nobody came, but I didn't know about a 3rd site.
Had you accepted Al Berry's offer to go ride and see the property, you could have spoken to him.
Well,
that's where I learned about it.
Well, let me tell you how I feel about that. I think it was more objective for me to go on my own, which I went probably in February, before maybe any of you had gone. So the point is, I don't think, I even said that, I don't know that the person that is the representative selling it, I don't know that I needed him to go sell me on it. I need to be sold on it by what I've seen as we're all together. So I went on my own. But I did not know about 3, and that's my only point. Because sometimes I think that's the process that bothers me sometimes. You know, some of you may know something we're not all shared with, so that bothers me.
Well, he doesn't represent the seller. He represents us. And you should consider relying upon your own experts.
Does he have a financial interest in it? Does he make money from selling it?
Does Al Berry,
Does he?
Do we hire Al Berry? Does Al Berry work for the seller?
Mr. Berry is our consultant on this property. You know what, Ms. Hammond?
No, there's an implication here that Al Berry's getting paid by the seller. We need to put that on the table right now and answer that question. Is he getting paid by the seller?
The 5% is what I was told, but maybe I'm wrong.
Are you getting paid by the seller?
I mean, the people should know.
I think this is out of order. I really do think this is out of order. That, you know.
I would agree with Ms. Hammond. Let's stop this process. Ms. Hammond, I will say this. Your last question certainly started a buzz, but you, as well as every board member, had the opportunity to go. For whatever reason you decided not to. You went on your own.
That's right.
I think every other board member went, looked, saw alternate sites, saw the whole island. So at this point, we've had a suggestion that we take a vote. I think we're there. And we've had a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Clarify, what motion are you presenting?
The motion that I read.
Well, you also had a motion for the question, which should be voted on prior to the motion. I mean, are you ceasing debate? Is that the decision of the chair?
Yeah, stopping the debate. Yep.
I still have some clarifying questions, and I've been patiently waiting.
I'm a little lost. We're getting ready to vote on the motion Mr. White made and the second that was made, because it appeared that everybody had a round discussion and an open opportunity to talk when they did. I'm at the pleasure of the board, but that seems to be where we ought to be, and I think we've just degenerated in this last little exchange. But we don't have 2 motions out there. We have 1 motion.
To clarify, was your motion not to call for the question, which may be casually understood as let's stop talking and debate, but is actually a motion to call for the question. Was that the motion?
No, I deliberately was not making a motion because I wanted to be more, make it a more friendly suggestion than calling for the question. I prefer that method.
It's also customary to allow individuals to speak prior to going back second or third times. And I'm simply asking, may I ask some clarifying questions that I was not given the opportunity to ask?
Mr. Cates, you are welcome to do that, and I usually look both ways. I didn't see your hand up, or I apologize, but you are certainly welcome to do that. And then, however this board wants to proceed, we will. You make your comments or questions.
Thank you. First off, I appreciate the service of every member on this board and hope our discourse never turns against one another. I just simply have 2 or 3 clarifying questions from what I heard during the presentation and what we have discussed. First, just to be clear, we have a clear F2 form, which is the form acquired from the Department of Education that would allow us to proceed to purchase the site with no encumbrances on that form.
That's correct. Mr. Richardson obscured that this afternoon, I believe, with no encumbrances. I thought you saw that form.
I did. I said these were clarifying questions. Not everybody was in the same place. I'm just, Miles, my observation is that we have an appraisal that supports the purchase price, and that From what I understand from the traffic study and speaking with those folks today, there are no red lights, no pun intended. There's no flags indicated in that study or in any of the comments that came back from DHEC that may cause us a problem in the near future. I just want to make sure that's an accurate.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I don't see any hands up. It's been suggested that we vote with no hands up. I would entertain that all those in favor of Mr. White's motion that has also been seconded, been roundly discussed, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. And the motion passes 6-1. And thank you all very much for your input and interest. That brings us to item number 13B. I think we'll just sit quietly for a second. That brings us to our second action item, number 14, proposed amendment to the 2017-18 budget. And Mr. Richardson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I did have a PowerPoint that I was going to show you, but I guess in the haste of getting all this other things ready, we did not bring it with us tonight, so I'm just going to discuss real briefly what the changes are in our general fund budget. On May the 22nd, the board approved our general fund budget for 2018. After that date, the state's appropriation bill was ratified by the General Assembly on June 6, 2017, so I am bringing an amended general fund budget to you for approval tonight. It reflects the changes in the adopted state budget. Really briefly, there were two changes that affected us. It did not affect our overall expenditures. Those have remained the same. It's not going to affect our revenues, but it's going to affect how we're getting those revenues, and I wanted you to make you aware of that. As part of the budget that we passed on May 22nd, the base student cost in the state budget at that time was $2,435, but the final state budget appropriated $2,425. That resulted in a reduction in our projected revenues for the Education Finance Act of $172,000. Another change that happened as a result of the final state budget, there were some differences between the House version and the Senate version. Ultimately, this is what they came up with. Originally, we had approved our budget with the 2% increase in the employer contributions, and all the additional funding was coming to the district to help offset the cost of those additional costs for next year. However, the final state appropriations bill sends 1% of the funding that we thought we were going to receive straight to the South Carolina retirement system. South Carolina retirement system, in turn, is going to give us a credit of an amount of money on an annual basis to help offset the cost of that 2% increase. We still have to increase our contributions by 2%, and they're just going to credit us for the difference rather than us receiving the revenue directly from the state. It doesn't really change anything next year, but it could change things down the road if the General Assembly decides at some time to not fund that amount. We're stuck with it. If they somehow decide to freeze that amount, which they've been known to do in the past, then we're going to have to pick up that increased cost. This is something that needs to be funded forever. I just felt the need to make you aware of those two changes. One other thing that was added in this budget where I do not have it budgeted because I am a little leery that we're going to get those funds, but there's also a proviso that was inserted that puts $5 million statewide to help offset, give us a hold harmless to offset how the EFA funds are distributed. If we receive that money, it will result in approximately an additional $450,000 to School District 5. If they fully funded us, it'd be over $2 million, but we'll take the $450,000. Like I said, that's not in this budget because I'm not 100% sure we're going to receive that money. That all being said, I apologize that you don't have this in your packet. You may have gotten the PowerPoint in your packet. I'm not sure, but I apologize I don't have it. But I've, in Exhibit C, have outlined for you what the differences are only on the revenue side of our budget. And it reflects a reduction of $172,226 in the Education Finance Act line item that we have. So we had approved $41,937,136 for our EFA projected revenue for next year. The revised amount is $41,764,910, which is a reduction of $172,226. What that does is increase, at least on paper, if we don't receive the $450,000 and everything goes as planned, it increases the amount that we would have to dip into our fund balance from $4,377 to $176,602, which is an increase of that $172,000. Is really, in a nutshell, what happened, and I'll be glad to try to entertain any questions if you have any at this time.
Anyone have any questions? Ms. Hammond.
It's just a general question. Do you think, are they still working on, like, trying to come up with a better formula? You know, I mean, I know it's kind of run to death asking that, but sometimes when something like this comes up, I'm wondering if you're hearing any buzz of trying to come up with a better formula.
I've been doing this for 30 some odd years now, and I think we've been studying it for 30 some odd years now. I haven't heard of any specific plans that have been, other than what was done 2-3 years ago, I think, with a group that proposed a funding plan.
Do you think that, you know, I guess the lawsuit is still ongoing, you know, for the districts that don't have the money, and I know that's some of the things that Mr. White presented, and we got some money. I think that lawmakers heard us, but I just wondered if there is more thoughts of how they would generate that revenue for those schools. I just think this made me think about it. I know this isn't about that, but it made me think about it.
Well, one of the things that happened in the Appropriations Act this year was some funds that were set aside for capital projects for the plaintiff districts. Because I think that's where they really are lacking the ability to raise revenue locally to be able to build schools, and so the General Assembly did put some money for that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Mr. Cates.
So, I just want to go back to your talk. It's kind of hard to follow the ball, right? So 2% increase required by the district for the retirement contribution. They're collecting a percentage, and we anticipate they're going to disperse that to us to match half of that, or is that part of the formula still up in the air?
No, sir. What was originally proposed was the money was going to come directly to the school district to offset that 2% increase. But as I mentioned, 1% is going directly to the retirement system. We're getting 1%, and then they're just going to credit us for that amount. on an annual basis forever, I would assume.
That'd be good.
So so I guess the difference in the 172,000 some odd dollars is from the $10 difference in the base student costs. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Richardson, would our motion be that we approve this amendment and that would cover you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would entertain a motion along those lines. Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we approve the proposed amendment to the 2017-2018 budget as shown in Exhibit C.
Any discussion, any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to our discussion agenda, and I believe, Dr. Hefner, you told me that we're going to